Could Israel be quietly building a multi-billion-dollar stealth bomber? The rumor sounds dramatic, but it pins to a real problem. Israel has world-class fighters and cyber tools, yet lacks an organic, long-range platform capable of carrying massive bunker-busting munitions. That capability gap was spotlighted when the US used B-2 stealth bombers and heavy penetrators against hardened Iranian sites, missions Israel's jets can't perform alone. Washington is now debating policy fixes, think the bunker buster bills, while analysts weigh the technical, legal, and political hurdles of transferring or developing such systems. So could Israel be quietly building a multi-billion-dollar stealth bomber? Israel's Air Force is world-class in many ways. Advanced fighters like the F-35 and upgraded F-15s give it exceptional situational awareness, electronic warfare capability, and precision strike options inside a contested zone. Those jets are fast, agile, and lethal, perfect for air superiority and tactical strikes. But they're not designed for deep, strategic missions that require carrying extremely large munitions or flying long distances undetected without support. That's the core limitation: range and payload. Israel can reach distant targets with aerial refueling, but tanker operations are complex, expose aircraft to risk, and don't solve the need for a dedicated heavy payload platform. Enter the recent 12-day clash. For the first time in that conflict, the US committed one of its most secretive assets, the B-2 stealth bomber, into direct action, delivering massive bunker-busting ordnance against hardened underground sites. Those are weapons and delivery platforms Israel doesn't field. The so-called Massive Ordnance Penetrator and its cousins require specialized aircraft with sizable bomb bays and the stealth to penetrate dense air defenses. That moment exposed an operational shortfall. When the mission demanded deep reach and heavy penetration, Israel relied on American capability. So the takeaway: Israel dominates at tactical and regional levels, but lacks an organic strategic bomber capability to strike deeply buried targets independently. That operational gap, made painfully visible during recent strikes, is the spark behind talk of a bomber, whether developed at home, acquired, or hypothetically imagined. Okay, now let's get to the rumor itself, and do it without drama. Over the past months, a persistent narrative has circulated that Israel is quietly funding or developing a multi-billion-dollar stealth strategic bomber. The motivation is simple and stark: a desire to hold deeply buried high-value targets at risk without relying on US strike assets. If true, this would represent a huge leap from Israel's current force structure and a major strategic statement. But how much of that is reporting, and how much is wishful thinking? First, separate motivation from evidence. The motive is real. A capability gap exists. The evidence is murkier. Most public signals are circumstantial contractors hiring stealth engineers, increased R&D budgets, and speculative leaks that never reach formal confirmation. Intelligence and defense journalism thrive on these signals, which amplify into a plausible storyline even when hard proof is missing. Second, consider the players who might push such a program: defense firms, motivated policymakers alarmed by Iran's infrastructure, and hardliners favoring independent Israeli strike options. Opponents are equally vocal diplomats warning about escalation, technical skeptics noting industrial limits, and regional states who would view a new bomber as destabilizing. So, the bottom line: the rumor tracks with clear motives and plausible activity, but current public information remains circumstantial. This is a live whisper in the defense ecosystem, credible enough to demand scrutiny, vague enough that it's not yet a confirmed program. Now let's pull apart the political and legal reality behind the chatter. Transferring heavy strike tools isn't just a purchase, it's a policy earthquake. In Washington, you can't simply sign a check and export strategic bombers or their most sensitive weapons without Congress, national security reviews, and export controls that are designed to keep the most advanced platforms tightly inside U.S. hands. Remember the F-22 ban? The Obey Amendment and related rules effectively froze that jet's export because lawmakers worried about technology proliferation. That same caution applies to B-2 or B-21 class systems. Recently, DBL lawmakers floated the so-called bunker buster proposals bills that would enable transfer of massive ordnance or the means to deliver it. Supporters argue it's pragmatic. Give Israel the tools to handle hardened threats, so U.S. forces aren't dragged into kinetic missions. Opponents see strategic risks. Handing over capability could destabilize the region, trigger an arms race, and blur U.S. control over employment of doomsday-level ordnance. There are also legal hurdles: Arms Export Control Act reviews, interagency assessments, and formal congressional notification windows that expose any transfer to scrutiny and potential veto. Politically, any move toward giving Israel strategic bombers or MOPS would split opinion across both parties and the administration, with national security hawks on one side and restrainers on the other. The calculus in Washington weighs deterrence and burden sharing against proliferation risk and regional instability. Bottom line, even if the capability is desired, moving it from U.S. vaults into foreign hands faces high procedural, legal, and political bars. All right, now let's tackle the hard engineering question. Could Israel actually build or field a strategic stealth bomber? Short answer: technically possible, but brutally hard and painfully expensive. A true strategic bomber is more than a stealth shape slapped on a fuselage. You're talking about advanced radar-absorbent materials, precision manufacturing tolerances, bespoke low observable coatings, huge engines tuned for long endurance, and a bomb bay large enough to swallow a massive ordnance penetrator. Then add modern mission systems, AESA radar, integrated avionics, secure data links, EW suites, and the logistics tail specialized ground crews, maintenance depots, and a supply chain that can support decades of operations. That industrial ecosystem is what keeps platforms like the B-2 and B-21 in the U.S. inventory, not a single golden blueprint. Even if Israel tried a domestic program, timelines stretch into years, often decades, and costs balloon into the tens of billions. If they tried to reverse engineer or co-develop with Western partners, export controls and political approvals would bite. And practical limits matter? Where would such aircraft be based? Bomber basing requires secure runways, hardened shelters, and protection against sabotage. Operational doctrine changes too. Strategic bombers demand different command and control and escalation protocols than fighters. Finally, there's the delivery paradox. Having the bomb is meaningless without a credible delivery platform. Conversely, a bomber without suitable munitions limits its value. So while an Israeli bomber is conceptually possible, the technical, industrial, financial, and political hurdles make it an unlikely near-term reality. Okay, now let's look at the realistic alternatives Israel already has, or could scale faster and cheaper than a bespoke strategic bomber. First, extended range fighters plus tankers. Israel already operates F-15s and F-35s with excellent avionics. Bolstering aerial refueling, increasing tanker coverage, and refining long-range mission planning can reach many strategic targets without a new airframe. That's faster and politically cleaner than building a bomber. Second, standoff weapons and cruise missiles. Modern air-launched or sea-launched cruise missiles let platforms strike hardened sites from outside dense air defenses. Add stealthy launch platforms, even a medium-range standoff missile, and you degrade the need to penetrate deep with a manned bomber. Third, submarines and naval options. Diesel-electric subs like Israel's Dolphin class can carry long-range cruise missiles and operate covertly. A few survivable launches can deliver strategic effects while offering strong deterrence. Fourth, drones and UCAVs. Loyal, low-cost unmanned platforms can loiter, deliver precision munitions, or act as decoys to overwhelm defenses attractive for attrition or surgical strikes. Fifth, cyber, EW, and kinetic pairing. Combined cyber and electronic attack can blind or disable air defenses long enough for conventional platforms to strike, reducing the need for pure physical stealth. Finally, international cooperation and clandestine access. Co-development or basing arrangements with allies could provide reach without a domestic bomber program. Each option has trade-offs: range versus stealth, deniability versus permanence, but all are far more achievable in the near term than fielding a homegrown strategic stealth bomber. Now, let's examine the strategic implications if Israel pursued independent long-range strike options, whether that means a domestic stealth bomber, access to U.S. bunker busters, or a hybrid of submarines, standoff missiles, and advanced drones. First, deterrence. A credible strike capability aimed at deeply buried or high-value nodes would raise costs for adversaries and could reduce reliance on USB or kinetic intervention that can stabilize behavior if rivals perceive the capability as both real and responsibly controlled. But deterrence is a two-edged sword. Second, escalation dynamics. If Israel acquires dramatic new reach, opponents may respond by hardening targets, dispersing assets, or accelerating their own programs. That creates a security dilemma. One side's defense becomes another side's insecurity, fueling a classic arms race. Third, regional proliferation. Nearby states might pursue counter-capabilities, more advanced air defenses, longer-range missiles, or maritime strike forces, raising overall instability. Fourth, U.S. strategic interests. America weighs burden sharing against proliferation risk. Supplying critical tech could reduce U.S. intervention needs, but would also export control dilemmas and political costs in Congress and among allies. Finally, command and escalation control. Entrusting a partner with strategic strike tools requires clear rules, communication channels, and crisis management protocols to avoid unintended conflict. In short, the benefits of Israeli independent strike are real, but so are the risks, and how Washington frames and manages those risks will determine if deterrence holds or spirals into competition. Ultimately, policy choices matter more than hardware. Thoughtful diplomacy must accompany any capability. Indeed. All right, time to run 3 tight scenarios. I'll keep each one crisp so you can judge the odds yourself. Best case, Israel develops or acquires limited long-range strike options that are tightly scoped, transparent, and integrated into clear command and control rules. That might mean a handful of specialized platforms, enhanced standoff weapons, and submarine-launched cruise missiles under strict oversight. The result? A stronger deterrent that reduces U.S. impulse to intervene, lowers immediate escalation risk, and reassures Israeli planners they can act when vital threats emerge, all while avoiding a regional arms sprint. Diplomacy and export controls remain intact, and crisis channels are formalized to prevent miscalculation. Most likely case, a hybrid outcome where Israel expands reach without fielding a full strategic stealth bomber. Expect deeper investment in tanking and range for fighters, more and better standoff munitions, upgraded subs, and larger UAV strike packages. The U.S. offers selective cooperation, maybe munitions, training, or intelligence, but resists transferring the most sensitive platform. This path increases Israel's independence incrementally, shifts some burden off Washington, and produces occasional diplomatic friction, but it stops short of a doctrinal revolution or an immediate regional arms race. Worst case, rapid transfers or a successful domestic bomber program trigger a security dilemma. Regional rivals accelerate missile, air defense, and strike program. Covert operations and preemptive postures rise. Small crises risk spiraling as new capabilities lower political thresholds for action. Congressional backlash and allied unease complicate U.S.-Israel ties. and crisis management becomes harder as more actors possess deep strike options. In short, capability without commensurate governance could destabilize the region. Which scenario feels most realistic to you? Let's cut through jargon and explain why bunker-busting weapons and delivery platforms are married system. The Massive Ordnance Penetrator isn't a magic hammer you can toss from any aircraft. It's a 15-ton weapon that needs a plane with a sufficiently large bomb bay, precise release mechanisms, and flight characteristics that match the weapon's aerodynamics. Throw weight, and center of gravity shifts into the mix, and you quickly see why only a handful of aircraft in history can safely carry such ordnance. Stealth adds another layer. Shaping, edge alignment, and composite materials change how a plane carries external or internal loads, which is why modern strategic stealth platforms use internal bays. That internal bay must be huge, and its doors must open without compromising low observability, not a trivial engineering problem. Beyond structure, think propulsion and stealth maintenance. Long-range bombers need high bypass engines optimized for fuel efficiency and low infrared signature. They need thermal management so their exhaust doesn't give them away to modern sensors. Low observable coatings demand specialized facilities and periodic recoating, an industrial pipeline most countries don't possess. Avionics and EW also matter. Penetrating advanced integrated air defense systems requires powerful EW suites, secure data links, and inertial navigation resilient to jamming. Finally, munitions integration isn't plug-and-play release algorithms. Arming safeties and separation dynamics require flight tests and certification cycles that can take years. So the short truth? The bomber is more than sheet metal. It's a complex system of systems: airframe, propulsion, sensors, weapons, sustainment, all of which have to be designed, tested, and fielded together. That's why capability gaps can't be bridged overnight. Here's the bottom line for US viewers. The rumor of an Israeli stealth strategic bomber captures a real strategic impulse. Israel wants autonomous, long-range options to threaten deeply buried targets. But turning that impulse into operational reality is neither quick nor inevitable. Technically, designing, testing, and sustaining a low, observable strategic bomber is a decade-scale, multi-billion-dollar undertaking. Politically, any transfer of U.S. on technology or a major export would run through drawn-out congressional and interagency checks. Practically, Israel already has cheaper, faster alternatives, more tankers, standoff missiles, submarine-launched cruise missiles, and advanced unmanned systems that can address many of the same threats without triggering immediate regional panic. Strategically, the real question isn't whether Israel can or can't build a bomber. It's whether Washington and Jerusalem are willing to accept the risk trade-offs that come with independent strategic strike. Reduced U.S. operational burden versus greater proliferation, harder escalation control, and potential arms races. For American policymakers, the calculus should hinge on governance measures, strict rules of engagement, joint crisis management protocols, and tight export controls if any sensitive capability is shared. For analysts and the public, the useful takeaway is this: hardware matters, but doctrine and diplomacy matter more. If Israel moves toward deeper strike independence, the test won't be the plane itself, it will be the political architecture built around it, period. We've walked the gap between rumor and reality, untangled the political and technical hurdles, and sketched the practical alternatives Israel could use instead of a bespoke strategic bomber. If you take one thing away, let it be this: the existence of a capability is less important than how it's governed. Weapons change incentives. Policy and doctrine shape outcome. A plane, a bomb, or a submarine matters only insofar as the humans and institutions deciding when and how to use them are wired to prevent escalation and miscalculation. If you found this helpful, here's what I want you to do next. Hit subscribe so you don't miss our upcoming deep dive comparing the B-2, B-21, and a hypothetical Israeli design. Will run the numbers on range, payload, cost, and survivability. Drop a comment with which scenario you think will play out best, most likely, or worst, and why. I'll pick the sharpest arguments and feature them in a follow-up video. If you've got sources, links, or reporting I missed, paste them below. I'll read and incorporate verified additions in future episodes. Finally, a quick promise: this channel will keep separating hype from hard analysis. We'll keep the technical detail tight, the politics honest, and the scenarios plausible. Thanks for watching and for caring about the mechanics behind modern deterrence. See you in the next video, same channel. More breakdowns, less speculation.